Hi, folks. So we're starting to get a few questions, and I think we'll get started. If you are having trouble hearing, please make sure, well, I guess you might not hear me say this, but perhaps one of my colleagues can type this answer in. Please make sure that you have the sound turned on your computer. Again, my name is Amanda Gerke. I'm with the City of Alameda's Community Development Division. I just want to give a few technical notes before we get started. So we're going to have a pretty substantial time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Please enter your questions in the Q&A function, which should be on the bar at the bottom of your screen. And for the questions, please try to focus them on the topic of the SBA loans. Right now, we have all attendees on mute so that the speakers can be heard, but you're welcome to communicate with staff using the chat function, and we hope you will. We are looking at having another series of webinars, and we would like to hear from you about what topics you would like to see us address and any other input that you have for us. So you can provide that with the chat function. You can also email us at econdev@alamedaca.gov, which is the email address you see on your screen right now. So we're also going to be recording this presentation. We're going to post it to the city's website, and we'll send you an email when that is live. And finally, we are all kind of coming up to speed on remote working and Zoom webinars, so we may have some delays with the transition or some technical difficulties. So please bear with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alameda Mayor Marilyn Ezzy Ashcraft to welcome you all and to introduce the speaker. So Marilyn, if you could unmute and join the call.
I've been unmuted. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today to learn more about the Small Business Administration's Economic Injury Disaster Loans. But before we get started, I want to welcome you on behalf of the City of Alameda. And I also want to thank Amanda Gerke and the rest of the Community Development Department at the City of Alameda for jumping on this topic so expeditiously. You know, it has been 8 days, can you believe only 8 days since Alameda County and other Bay Area County public health officers issued the shelter-in-place order that was then followed by the governor issuing the stay-at-home order. And we've all been struggling with how to work with this, but the overarching reason for this policy is to slow the spread of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic. So first and foremost, the health of our community is our largest priority. But we also understand that Alameda's small businesses and businesses everywhere are at the heart of our city. And we know what a difficult time this is for many of you, and we're working hard to support you during these uncertain times. We have assembled a number of resources for businesses and workers who have been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, and we're updating that list daily. The link to this list will be on this slide. In fact, there it is. Or you can visit the city's website, alamedaca.gov, and click on the red banner to access our COVID-19 resources page, which is also updated daily. This includes information, the economic development link will include information on sick leave, as well as paid leave for folks who are taking care of a sick family member or caring for children while schools are closed. For businesses, we have information on grants and loans, as well as technical assistance and business counseling. And that link will be provided during the chat and in a follow-up email to this webinar. One of the most important resources for small businesses that you will find on our website is the Small Business Administration's Economic Injury Disaster Loans Program. I want to thank Corey Williams, nice to meet you there, Mr. Williams, for the SBA's, who comes from the SBA's Disaster Relief Team, for joining us today to share this important information. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Corey. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and I'm going to stay in this webinar because I want to take notes on what you have to say. So thank you, everyone, for being here, and we're all going to get through this together. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Mayor Ashcroft for having me on, and thank you, Amanda, and the City of Alameda for having me on today. Again, my name is Corey Williams. I'm a Public Information Officer with the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Assistance. And, you know, it's tough to be with you at this time dealing with this pandemic of COVID-19, of coronavirus. But the one thing we want to do is stand behind our small businesses, our nonprofits, our small agricultural co-ops, to do whatever we can as a federal agency to get them back on their feet or keep them operational during this operational period. Now, part of this is our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So I just wanted to give a quick little overview of what the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program entails. So if your small business is in a declared disaster area and has suffered substantial economic injury, your business may be eligible for an economic injury disaster loan. Now, Governor Newsom actually requested that the economic injury disaster loan declaration, and all throughout the state of California, so every county in California, of the declared disaster area. Now, substantial economic injury means the business is unable to meet its obligations and pay its ordinary and necessary expenses. Now, economic injury disaster loans will provide necessary working capital to help small businesses until normal operations resume. Now, our administrator, Jovita Carranza, on January 31st, which is the date of the press release, is as to when the pandemic actually was, officially, I guess, where the impacted business was, declared this disaster last week, but again, it went back to January 31st as the incident date. Now, the U.S. Small Business Administration's low-interest economic injury disaster loans are now available to all small businesses, small agriculture cooperatives, and aquaculture businesses and private nonprofit organizations impacted by the loss of revenue due to the coronavirus. Now, EIDLs are available to small businesses, small agricultural co-ops, small aquaculture businesses, and most private nonprofit organizations. Now, a couple of examples of eligible businesses would include businesses directly impacted by the disaster, also businesses that offer services directly related to the businesses targeted in the declaration, and other businesses indirectly related to the industry that are likely to be harmed by losses in their community. Now, I have a law school background, and one of the things we used was a but-for test. And when you look at different things as far as the impact on COVID-19, you think about a trickle-down effect. You think about events, maybe in the city of Alameda, the whole entire shutdown. At one point, Governor Newsom had a limited amount in the restaurants. So that impacts not only the restaurant industry, that impacts the tourism, that impacts the hotel industry. And then now with not as many people able to fly in, that impacts not only just all the businesses in that particular area. So that's what I always call that, but for COVID-19, these things would not have happened. Now, economic injury disaster loans are to help meet working capital needs caused by the declared disaster and to help pay financial obligations and operating expenses which could have been paid but for had the disaster not occurred, which would include fixed debt payments, payroll, accounts payable, extraordinary expenses caused by the disaster. However, economic injury disaster loans do not replace lost revenue, lost profits, or fund expansion. Now, to make the terms much easier, we've done a number of modifications to our SBA disaster loan program in regard to COVID-19. Now, for all of our loans are set at 30 years for repayment. So whether someone borrows an unsecured amount of $25,000 or the maximum amount of $2 million, all the loan terms are going to be at 30 years. And that's set by SBA, and they'll be based on each applicant's financial condition. But by stretching it out over 30 years, that helps for the repayment part, which will be in one of my next slides. Now, economic injury disaster loan assistance is available only to small businesses when SBA determines they are unable to obtain credit elsewhere. And economic injury disaster loans are limited to $2 million less any business interruption insurance and other recoveries. Now, I want to touch upon the business interruption insurance. Now, I'm sure you've seen in some of the media reports that COVID-19, because of its nature as a pandemic, hasn't been covered in a lot of business interruption insurance policies. So most likely there is not a duplication of benefits. But if under your business interruption policy, COVID-19 is covered, the one thing we don't want is for you to end up having to get a loan whenever you have insurance recovery. So that's the purpose of being able to have that business interruption insurance and also have our economic injury disaster loan program. Now, you can apply online for our SBA economic injury disaster loan program by going to sba.gov, and then on the front of the page, you'll actually see a coronavirus link, and that will link you to our electronic loan application. Now, we have had a number of hits on the application, so the one thing that I would encourage you to do is to have patience with our disaster loan assistance portal and to continue trying to access it. But we also have our customer service center number, which is 1-800-659-2955. And there you'll be connected to one of our virtual customer service center representatives, and they will walk through not only answering every question that you may have, but walk through step by step and helping you complete your application process. Now, we can go to the next slide for credit requirements. Now, two things that the SBA determines in evaluating eligibility for an economic injury disaster loan is credit history and repayment ability. Again, applicants must have a credit history acceptable to SBA, and applicants must show the ability to repay all loans. But as I alluded to earlier, that because of the terms being, all of our loans being at 30 years, this easily aids repayment ability, especially for an unsecured amount. Now, all of our loans are also fixed rate for all businesses. The interest rate is 3.75%. And for nonprofits, the interest rate is 2.75%. Again, fixed over the entire 30-year period, and it's a 1-year deferment on all of our loans. That means the first payment, once you actually get the working capital, would not be due until April of 2021 or May of 2021, whenever your loan would fund. We can go to the next slide with collateral requirements. Now, all of our economic injury disaster loans over $25,000 require some form of collateral. Now, we're also in the process of modifying a number of things to kind of streamline the process in regard to collateral. So we understand that a number of county offices where deeds are recorded, where normally it may be a real estate being taken as collateral, SBA is looking at alternate forms of collateral, such as a security agreement, maybe in furniture, fixtures, equipment, inventory. So we're exploring different options of collateral other than real estate. Now, SBA will not decline a loan for lack of collateral, but requires borrowers to pledge what is available. Now we can go to the filing requirements. Now, we've also streamlined this approach as well as to make sure that it makes it easier for our businesses, nonprofits to turn in their application and hopefully get funding as soon as possible. By that, we only require the SBA Form 5, which is the completed SBA application, and then the Tax Information Authorization Form, which is a Form 4506T. Now, if you have any issues where you can't get that form through the Disaster Loan Assistance Portal, you can always go to irs.gov and download it under Common Forms. So there may be other requirements that'll be in other phases of our loan, but at least to get the initial process started, we need that SBA Form 5 and the IRS Form 4506T. Now, again, we may later need complete copies of the most recent federal income tax returns, which may be required for the applicant business, personal financial statements, which is an SBA Form 413, and a schedule of liabilities, which is an SBA Form 2202. Now, if you have any kind of accounting software such as QuickBooks, the one thing you don't have to use the personal financial statement, the form that we have. So if you have a form that's through your QuickBooks or schedule liabilities through your QuickBooks, feel free to submit those to our processing center. Now we'll go to the next slide with additional information which may be necessary to process your application, which would include any complete copy, including all schedules of all the most recent federal income tax returns for each principal owning 20% or more, each general partner or managing member of an LLC, and each affiliate when any owner has more than 50% ownership in the affiliate business. Also, if the most recent federal income tax return has not been filed, a year-end profit and loss statement and balance sheet for that tax year. In addition, we may also require a current year-to-date profit and loss statement and also your monthly sales figures. Now, we'll go to the next slide, EIDL eligibility. Now, in determining eligibility for an economic injury disaster loan, we have a 4-part test that we look at: location, business activity, size, and whether the business is independently owned and operated. In regard to location, the applicant business must have a physical presence in the declared disaster area, and an applicant's economic presence alone in a declared area does not meet this requirement. The physical presence must be tangible and significant. Merely having a P.O. box in the disaster area would not qualify as a physical presence. In regard to the business activity, the primary activity or the primary industry of the applicant and its affiliated group must be an otherwise eligible activity for the applicant to be eligible, regardless of the nature of the lost activity, and primary activity based on the revenues the year preceding COVID-19. Loss activity: the activity for which the loss is being claimed must be eligible. So again, use that but-for test of COVID-19 as to determine the economic impact that it's had on your business, nonprofit, or small agricultural co-op. Size: the size of the applicant alone, without affiliates, must not exceed the size standard for the industry in which the applicant is primarily engaged. And the applicant, combined with its affiliates, must not exceed the size standard for either the primary activity of the applicant alone or the primary industry of the applicant and its affiliates, whichever is higher. Now going to independently owned and operated. Substantial business risk: the principals must have a business risk resulting from investing in facilities and equipment and by incurring ongoing expenses which must be paid regardless of whether the operation would generate a profit. Example being a crew member on a fishing boat would not be eligible. Also, it has to be free from significant control. The applicant business must be free from significant control by other concerns, e.g. the customers or businesses that pay for its services. Also, the impact on IRS guidelines. So merely filing a Schedule C with a federal tax return does not qualify the individual as an independently owned and operated business. Now, there are a number of criteria for as what we've determined as ineligible idle applicants. Now, the one thing that I want to encourage you to do is, as things are changing ever constantly, daily, with the number of things that we're modifying with the program, the one thing that I would encourage everyone to do is to never self-determine that you have credit available elsewhere, never self-determine that you're ineligible. The one thing we want to make sure that our messaging is to let our processing center determine if you're ineligible. And then once you have an application in the system, it's always a possibility that you can be considered for, at a later time. So with that being said, I'm going to pass on to the next, to the last slide, which is our disaster customer service information, which has the 1-800 number, so we can advance to that slide there. Now, if you have any questions, again, we have a virtual business recovery center set up to where you can speak with our customer service center representatives or our disaster recovery specialists online by going to 1-800-659-2955. And again, you can go online by going to SBA.gov, and then on the front page you'll see the coronavirus link where you can actually access the electronic loan application. Also, you can if you have any email inbox issues, you can always email our disaster customer service at SBA.gov. So again, giving you those phone numbers: 1-800-659-2955. The website address is sba.gov, and on the front you'll see the coronavirus link. Click that link and that will allow you to access the electronic loan application. And then also our inbox, which is the disaster customer service at sba.gov. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up for questions.
So Corey, are you able to read the questions that have been submitted by the participants?
Yes, I am. So the first question by Aaron, which is a great question: would it be great if you could address this question? We are a small business C Corp and have pretty diversified ownership. There's one individual and one entity who owns slightly more than 20% of our stock. Would they be required to provide personal guarantees for an idle loan? Now, again, great question, and I think I answered this in the actual box, that our processing center, our loan officer at our processing center will determine any need for personal guarantees. As our program is ever changing, there may be a requirement for the owner that has slightly more than 20%, but again, let our processing center make that determination. The main thing right now, Aaron, is to get that application completed and keep checking on your status in the disaster loan assistance portal. The next question from AP: I wonder if I'm currently being audited by the IRS and have not filed a current tax return, but have paid an estimated amount. Can I get an SBA loan? Well, at this time, being audited doesn't mean that they're in back pay for any kind of Internal Revenue Service debt. So at this time, I will strongly encourage you, AP, to go ahead and apply. And then if there are any tax obligations or like a monthly payment plan, that may be a part of your economic injury disaster loan to pay that monthly payment of that IRS debt if you end up having one after the audit. Another question by Aaron. Also, one more question. We have another debt facility with first priority lien on our assets. Would SBA be willing to subordinate to the first loan? Again, Aaron, another great question is that SBA in certain situations would be able to subordinate and be a second lien holder. But again, that decision is made by our processing center. So our loan officer is going to put you in, review the file and make the best determination on if we'll subordinate our loan, or we will maybe take other forms of collateral because we understand that the real estate is in a different situation. It's harder to record at this time. Now, can the app or supporting documents be dropped off anywhere locally? Another great question. Unfortunately, the documents cannot be dropped off to a local SBA district office. However, feel free to email the disaster customer service at sba.gov. And then also you can upload documents into your disaster loan assistance portal once you actually log in. So that is an opportunity as well. From John, is the City of Alameda been able to provide small businesses help with the SBA application process? I would defer to Amanda on that question.
So thanks, Corey. So the City of Alameda doesn't provide technical assistance on SBA applications at this time. However, there are a number of county resources, counseling and business centers that provide this kind of information. And when we send the follow-up email to this webinar, we'll include links to those. And then I also just want to remind people, please put your questions into the Q&A function instead of the chat function so that we make sure that we get to them.
Awesome. And I did want to add one point also to that, Amanda. We have a great relationship with our small business development centers, our SCORE chapters, our women's business centers. So you can also look for one of those centers that are near the City of Alameda, and they may also be able to provide that resource as well for supplemental help. Next question. If I've laid off all of my employees, are they still able to get any paid leave? What grants are available if I do not get an SBA disaster loan? At this time, SBA does not offer any grants. These are economic injury disaster loans. Now, again, very flexible repayment, knowing that even if you borrow the unsecured amount of $25,000, that will be stretched out over a 30-year period. In regard to having laid off the employees, the one thing that we would encourage you to do is stay in contact with your state representative in regard to employment. There may be a potential at a later time for disaster unemployment assistance. And I'm sure Amanda and Mayor Ashcraft with the city will keep you updated on when and if disaster unemployment assistance may be available. Veronica, I'm currently working on the Toy Safari project, and I'm looking for local contractors to get this project going. I've had a hard time getting contractors to bid on this project. Can the city connect me with any local contractors? I'll defer to Amanda on that one.
Hi, Veronica. So unfortunately with the city, we can't make recommendations on contractors, but we do have a list of contractors who've worked with the facade grant program in the past, and I'm happy to pass that along to you.
Awesome. We have another one. Are insurance companies accepting claims for this disaster? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, with COVID-19 being a pandemic, a number of business interruption policies are excluding this from coverage. The one thing that I would strongly recommend that you do is, at least if you think you have a business interruption insurance policy in place, still contact your local insurance agent. That's probably the best way to do it. Can you share the pros and cons of the economic injury disaster loan versus 7A SBA facilities that are now in the phase 3 stimulus package? Well, the one thing I can mention is about the economic injury disaster loan program. Can't really compare it to the stimulus package because, again, that's one of the things you want to keep in contact with your local U.S. representative or your local U.S. senator. But as far as for the economic injury disaster loan program, the one thing I would say is a true benefit is even for the businesses that may only need as little as $25,000, which is an unsecured amount of capital. being able to stretch that out over a 30-year period. I believe I did a webinar earlier today with in the state of Nevada. It's one of my other coverage areas, and I believe that amortized over 30 years ends up being $92 a month. And again, with that loan, even though it's stretched out over that 30-year period, keep in mind there's no prepayment penalty, no cost to apply, and a 1-year deferment. So until we get further information about the stimulus package, again, I would strongly recommend that you stay in contact with your local U.S. representative or U.S. senator to keep getting updates. It's moving kind of fast. Let's see. Okay, I'll go to Yvonne. Are there other types of SBA loans you can talk about beside the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program? At this time, this is the only program that's being offered in regard to COVID-19. I'm a sole proprietor criminal defense investigator and have office space I need to maintain. Would I be eligible? Yes, Charlotte, you would be eligible because you're a part of your normal operating expenses is your rent to keep your business in operation. So yes, you would be eligible, and we strongly encourage you to apply. My business has been running well and we have zero debts as of today. That will change though as we get into the next month and rent, credit card, and bills become due. What do I include in scheduled liabilities and how do you account for debts that are forthcoming? Outstanding question. So what happens is the main thing what we want to do is make sure that you get the application in as soon as possible. The reason being is that with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, it is a very flexible program. So let's say initially you only get approved for the unsecured $25,000, but then maybe 2 months down the line, you realize you need another $25,000. Well, instead of applying for a brand new loan, you have up to 2 years from the date of your promissory note to request increases in loan amount. So that shows you the flexibility of being able to have the economic injury disaster loan. We sent in our application already and did not see that the year-end profit and loss statement was required. Is this required automatically or will be requested if needed? Well, due to us streamlining the actual loans and trying to get funding to our businesses and nonprofits sooner, we're actually not requiring this initially, but keep in contact with your loan officer in the processing center so when it may be required, you will be able to turn it in. Is it true that a portion of the loan could become a grant if we are using it for payroll or some fixed expenses? Now, in regard to the SBA Economic Disaster Loan Program, that is not the case at this time. Again, there is legislation in place. I strongly encourage you, John, to keep in contact with your local U.S. representative, your local U.S. Senate, and they will explain any kind of Appropriations Act. Jenny, we already filled out the application and we cannot find a place to put what our expected loss to be. Do they contact you in the review process to discuss the amount you'd like to request? Or did we perhaps fill it out incorrectly? Jenny, you did not fill it out incorrectly. So the one thing, again, that and making sure we're getting the funds our businesses as soon as possible is to let our processing center, once they speak with you and look at your 4506T and all your your application, they will make a better determination initially of what you might need. So our processing center will make that determination. And again, keep in mind that it's stretched out over that 30-year period to keep repayment much lower. AP, I own a cafe in downtown and they are worried as to what it will look like downtown. It's boarded up. They do not want others to follow suit and they want to make an example. Again, this is a purpose of us having, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Everybody is trying to do the best we can to sustain the operations. The one thing that I would encourage you is to go ahead and apply to make sure that you are keeping your business sustained during this period. What about if my business has already a previous SBA business loan? Is this a conflict? No, Great question, Rita. It's not a conflict. So, in fact, it may be a circumstance that if you have a prior SBA loan, you could be also eligible for a deferment on that loan up until the end of 2020, in addition to the 1-year deferment on the SBA disaster assistance loan. Darren, what if you do not know the extent of the economic loss? Again, another great question. Our processing center, our loan officers in Fort Worth have extensive experience in being able to help identify that initial economic impact. So, Darren, your loan officer is going to make sure to put together a package that will get you initially the funds you need and also sustain during this recovery period. We are an S Corp and did a major expansion in 2019, so profit was minimal. Will prior year's tax returns be considered? Again, in the first phase, as we are doing a lot of changes to our program, the initial tax returns right now, that's not one of the major requirements, but at some point, tax returns will be looked into, Stephen. But again, we strongly encourage you to apply because, again, keep in mind, our loans are very flexible. Tom, can the application be submitted online and then have the additional documents mailed to the Fort Worth SBA office? Yes, they can be submitted online. And then also, once you actually get a loan officer assigned to your case, not only can you scan and email the documents directly to the actual loan officer, but you can also mail them to our Kingsport address, and the loan officer will provide that address for you, Tom. Stephanie, I've been unable to continue my application process due to the site being under maintenance. Is this going to get resolved? Yes, we are working diligently, Stephanie, to make sure we're getting the application, our disaster loan assistance portal, back on track. We apologize for any delays, but we are working very diligently to get it back on track as soon as possible. What is the estimated time frame between application submission, approval, and funding? David, great question. We're actually aiming for a 2 to 3 week turnaround. Some approvals have actually been even less, been in a few days. Again, Sloan, the website, again, we're working diligently to make sure we're addressing the maintenance issues. Okay, Mike, will the most recent bill passed by the Senate, $350 billion for small businesses, be administered by the SBA? This bill is supposed to include disaster loans that will be forgiven if we continue to pay our employees. At this point, Mike, another great question. We are not sure if that bill is going to allow us to administer that program. Right now, we are responsible for the economic injury disaster loan program that we've discussed. Lisa, can I get Info Corey to try and coordinate getting a webinar like this done through our trade association? We'd love to. Feel free to email me at Corey, C-O-R-E-Y, .williams@sba.gov. Again, that's C-O-R-E-Y .williams@sba.gov. Nikki, what is the estimated time for response to an application file? Again, we're aiming once they submit the application through our disaster loan assistance portal. The one thing I would encourage you, Nikki, to do is check into your file every day just to see what kind of status you're at. I did not lay off any employees at our restaurant. Would you recommend doing so? What would be the pros and cons? I would rather not answer that. The one thing we want to do is, and the purpose of our economic injury disaster loan program is to make sure that you're hopefully keeping your employees on the payroll so you don't lose valuable employees. So that's the purpose of our economic injury disaster loan program. Could you elaborate on whether a self-employed independent contractor, real estate broker is filing Schedule C? Now, if there is a business entity, and when I say a business entity, could be a sole proprietorship, a general partnership, a LLC, a LLP, C Corp, S Corp. If you have a business entity, we welcome all those applications. Now, the one thing I would err on the side of caution, Steve, go ahead and turn in your application and let our processing center determine whether you're not eligible. Can you please go over what the loan covers? I like, you mentioned it wouldn't cover lost revenue. So Again, Lisa, the loan actually covers payroll expenses, anything that's going to keep your business operational during this recovery period. So that can be keeping your payroll, that can be taking care of your monthly obligations, your lease obligations, your accounts payable, any kind of things that are going to make sure that your business stays on pretty much afloat during this recovery period. From the time the application is sent, how long does it take to receive funds? Again, we're aiming for a 2 to 3 week turnaround. From the time any prepayment penalties. There is absolutely no prepayment penalties, no cost to apply, no application fees. I applied 1 week ago. Do you know when we might hear back from a processor or underwriter? Mike, I would strongly encourage you to go ahead and log into your disaster loan assistance portal. You should be able to have an update, and make sure that if you don't have an update, call our customer service center number 800-659-2955. I own a business, and separately outside of the company, I am the owner of a piece of real estate with a restaurant on it. The tenant of that restaurant is unable to pay me rent. Do I qualify for a loan to cover the cost of that building if the tenant does not pay me? Yes, because that is a monthly obligation that you have to take care of to keep you're paying on that land to keep that, keep that land. So yes, that is something that is covered. What is the estimated expected time for response to an application being filed? Again, we are aiming that we can fund loans between 2 to 3 weeks. Am I still eligible to get a loan as my business went down like 70%, but I do have another source of employment? We encourage you to apply. Again, you never know, never self-determine what kind of eligibility you may have. Are 100% leverage ESOPs eligible? I'm not sure on that question. Feel free, Brendan, to email me that question, corey.williams@sba.gov. I would probably have to get a little more clarification on what an ESOP is. We don't see California listed as declared county. Can we apply? Yes. The entire state of California, every county within the state of California is declared. If we apply and our application is accepted, but then decide to move forward, can we decide at the time after approval to move forward with the loan? Yes, you have a reasonable time to actually decide if you want to receive a disbursement on your loan funds. What is an expected time period for your application to be in the review phase? Again, the one thing I would strongly suggest, logging into your disaster loan assistance portal daily, or if you want to just call the 800 number, you can always call the 800-659-2955, but make sure that you have your application number handy. Can you talk more about the lending requirement that the businesses cannot be eligible for a loan elsewhere? Most up until now, profitable businesses will be able to obtain a regular small business loan from a lender, would they not? So this doesn't automatically eliminate most businesses. Again, Yvonne, great question. You were referring kind of to our credit available elsewhere test. We've made a number of modifications to that, Yvonne. So the one thing I would say, please, please, please do not self-determine whether you have credit available elsewhere, so since you can go to a bank and get a business loan. We encourage all applicants to apply. I'm a sole proprietor, small business owner. I see home sole proprietor application and SBA disaster business loan application. Do I assume that I use the home? No, Bob, you're going to apply under the economic injury disaster loan tab. My small business has 7 locations in 3 different counties across 3 states. Can I apply 1 time or must I apply 7 times? Again, if you have 7 different standalone entities, Monica, also keep in mind the maximum threshold for all the businesses is a total of 2 million. No matter, that can be stretched out over, but it just depends on the number of standalone business entities. And when I say that, whether it's LLCs, C Corps, S Corps. Does a sole proprietor fill out the sole proprietor application and the business loan application? You should be filling out the tab that says economic injury disaster loan. And in fact, there should be a banner for COVID-19 that says economic injury disaster loan only. Are landlords whose tenants can't pay rent and have a mortgage to pay covered? Yes, landlords are eligible for our economic injury disaster loan program. Disaster loan portal, again, we're working diligently to get our disaster loan assistance portal up as soon as possible. Will this be a good time to change the business status from a Schedule C to a corporation? Is a corporation a better option for loan assistance? Again, you want to consult with your attorney on that, Veronica. Steve, we are considered an essential business and allowed to be open. However, over 90% of our customers are not open. Can we apply for the program? Yes, we encourage all businesses to apply. Lisa, we are in limbo with 3 home refis. Currently, they have been approved, but now are on hold with all of this. So at what point in the application process will this hit our credit with the personal credit file? With the SBA application, we do run a credit report. So it may end up being an inquiry on your credit report. But that is, our processing center will make, the determination of your loan amount, and then that amount will be determined as far as what shows up on your credit. Let's see, the last one. Can you talk about, let's see, okay. My business has been running well and we have 0 debts as of today. That would change though as we get into the next month. I think we covered this one earlier. We want to make sure that you're applying now. It's never too early to be proactive in that approach. Again, recent Senate legislation, I would strongly encourage you to get in contact with your U.S. Senator or U.S. Representative in regard to any kind of questions about the appropriations bill in regard to coronavirus and creditworthiness. So again, there is no, we never discuss any kind of credit score. The one thing we encourage all of our applicants to do is to put in the application, because with SBA, a no is not a final no. So even if you're initially not approved for a loan, there's 2 things you could do. One, you can actually apply for reconsideration within 6 months. And 2, you can request a copy, whether it's TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, whatever credit report we use to actually take to make our decision, review that credit report and see it. Sometimes it could be a collection on a credit bill or a TV bill, or a collection on or maybe a late payment that was reflected on your account that dropped your score. We've seen in 6 months scores go up tremendously. So the one thing with SBA, by getting an application in early, a no is not the final no. I think one more. If a landlord is not getting rent, gets an SBA loan, when the tenant starts paying current and back rent, does the landlord have to pay that back? Is the tenant's rent forgiven? Again, with the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, our loans at this point are not forgiven. So again, contact your local U.S. Senator, U.S. Representatives for details in regard to any kind of legislation that was passed. I think we got all the questions. Are there any other questions you think I missed?
Corey, there's one here, and I'm sorry, we were trying to dismiss the questions as soon as you answered them, but so some of these you might have already answered, but can you see Yvonne's question from 319?
Let's see. Oh, yes. Are there other types of SBA loans you can talk about besides the Economic Injury Disaster Loan? So again, at this time, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is the only loan program. Now, you're welcome to contact your local bank, but the one thing I would mention is that with our loan program, being able to stretch out a loan even up to $25,000 over a 30-year period is very beneficial.
And then there's a question from Laptop at 325. Hold on. We're all what does unable to obtain another loan mean?
Great question. Again, so that credit available elsewhere test, a lot of times most businesses kind of maybe self-determine, hey, I can go to Chase. Hey, I can go to Bank of America and potentially get a business loan. That doesn't always mean that you have credit available elsewhere. Again, my first recommendation, go ahead and put in the application. Let our processing center make the determination if there is credit available elsewhere.
There's a question from Charlotte at 326. I'm a sole proprietor criminal defense investigator and have an office space I need to maintain. Would I be eligible?
Yes, Charlotte is eligible to apply for the SBA loan because that is a necessary part of her maintaining her business, is to maintain that monthly lease obligation.
Okay, and so another question from AP says, do I forgive my tenant rent relief because the government has declared an emergency? You have been a huge help.
Well, great question. Again, there may be different things in regard to the legislation that was passed by the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House last night. But again, in regard to the SBA economic injury disaster loan program, we wouldn't really have any relation about the tenant relief or forgiving that rent, unfortunately, at this time.
And I see a question to repeat the slides more slowly at the end. Corey, can I share this slide deck with our attendees?
So what we ask is that we would be able to share the recording
Got it.
because we're making so many different modifications to our PowerPoint presentation, and there's so many changes. We'd rather keep that internal, but you're more than welcome to share this link. And I thank you so much, Amanda and Mayor Ashcraft, for having me on here in the City of Alameda.
Absolutely. So I will go through the slides briefly at the end of the webinar.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Corey, for coming out and joining us today. I'm just going to see if there's one or two more questions. I think you've answered most of them. There's someone who asked, can you please address application requirements for separate businesses owned by spouses? Are those businesses affiliates by default?
That's a great question. Processing wise, the one thing, again, if they're standalone entities, LLC, C Corps, S Corps, there is an option for them to apply separately, but the one thing, let our processing center actually make those determinations. The one thing that I do want to put into mind that's kind of a thing that you might think about. Let's say we have one business that has a need for about $75,000 of working capital, but they have three separate business entities, three separate LLCs, for instance. Well, one of the things that I would is that instead of getting one loan that's secured at $75,000, you might consider to get three unsecured loans at 25, 25, 25, because again, if there's three standalone entities, that allows you to get three unsecured loans for each LLC. So that may be an option that a business owner may look into.
Corey, could you give the hours of the customer service center again?
So the hours of the customer service center are from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern time. So again, that would be for us in California, be 4 a.m. till I think 4 p.m. And it may be later. And what I'll do, in fact, let me hold off on answering that, Amanda. Let me get the exact answer. I think it's 7 to 7, but Central Time. But let me find out for sure, and I'll get back with you on that answer.
Right, so we need to start wrapping this up, and you have answered 76 questions, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going to just see if our Mayor Marilyn had any comments that she wanted to make to wrap up the call.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for all that good information. I learned a lot just listening, and so I really am, and Amanda and your team, kudos to you for putting this all together. And again, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, 8 days, literally 8 calendar days since we got the first shelter-in-place order. So I know that we're all more informed than we were. This is a fluid situation, but it's just good to know that these resources are out there, and we've got your back. So thanks everybody for being here. And thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for all the good information.
Thank you so much, Mayor Ashcraft. I really appreciate you. Thank you for the City of Alameda, and thank you also, Amanda.
All right, thank you so much, guys. For those of you who want to hold on, I'm just gonna go through the slide deck more slowly because we had a request for that. And then
I'm signing off. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Mayor.
Bye,
And then
thanks.
If folks have other questions, please feel free to reach out to us at econdev@alamedaca.gov. Questions for SBA loans should go to the information that Corey provided, which I'll show again after I go through these slides. And then questions for the City of Alameda should come to econdev@alamedaca.gov. We also have a link with a lot of information for businesses and workers. It's on the screen right now, and I will send it out as a follow-up email to this. So you'll be getting it in your email as well. And then again, we did record this, or we are recording this presentation. We are going to post it up to our website, and we'll email you all when it is available. So with that, I'm just going to move forward and go through the slides a bit more slowly as was requested. And for folks who are interested in seeing these slides a little more close up, once we have the recording up, you will be able to pause on each slide. So I'm going to stop for just about 5 to 10 seconds on each at this point. Okay, folks, this is the last slide, so we are going to end the meeting. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll be hearing more from us soon.